Chapter 6, Resume Layout. In this video, we're going to look at the 7-section layout. This is 7 elements that are included on your resume. We're going to talk about what they are, how important they are, and what details should be in them, as well as where they should appear. Those 7 sections are your contact info, keywords and executive summary, your accomplishments, professional experience, education, professional affiliations, and training. And then we'll follow up with a review. Let's go ahead and get started right away with our 7-section layout. Here are the different elements that we're going to be talking about in this video and the way that they're laid out. Now, this is one page, but your resume does not have to be just one page. However, this is the suggested format as far as the order in which those elements should occur. Now, number 3 and 4, accomplishments and professional experience. Those can be combined together, and should you choose to do that, I'll be showing you exactly how you go about accomplishing that. So, first thing we're going to look at is contact information. And we're going to break each one of these sections down individually. The contact information shows up at the very top of your page. You want people to contact you, right? That's why you're sending the resume. So in order for them to do that, they've got to have the information that's going to allow them to contact you. And that would be your name, your phone number, a professional email address, and it can include a mailing address. It doesn't necessarily have to, but if you do include a mailing address, don't make it prominent because most of the time people prefer to use a phone or an email address. Now, do not include your current employer's contact information. So don't put their phone number and don't put, an email address that you have through that company. That's not only unethical, but it's tacky and disrespectful as well. And believe me, any little reason that you could give them for thinking that you're not professional or that you're incompetent, they're just going to blow you off on the spot. Now make sure that you double check all the information, all the details. They're not going to hunt you down. If your phone number is not right or your email address isn't quite right and they can't get in contact with you, that's it. It's over. Make sure the phone number is right. Make sure that you don't have an unprofessional email address. For example, studbunny@hotmail.com isn't going to get you the kind of interviews that you can write home about. Okay? Now, it is okay to use free email services like, Hotmail, Google, and Yahoo. But make sure that everything before that @ sign is professional. And that brings me to another point. I know I'm talking about your resume layout here, but this is the best place to mention that. Your voicemail answering machine greeting needs to be professional. If you're looking for a real job, you need to have a professional image, start to finish. That includes a voicemail message. If your voicemail message is, "Yo, what up, dog?" then they're going to hang up on you and never call back. And remember, recruiters are constantly worried that, their professional integrity is on the line. They're constantly worried that something could go wrong. Even their career they're concerned about. They're not willing to take any chances, and they're not going to. If your image appears to be unprofessional, they're not even going to consider you. Our next section is the keywords and executive summary section. We're going to be dealing with keywords a little bit later on in detail, but I do want to bring out a very important point here. Let's say that you're thinking about writing your executive summary, and after thinking about all of your qualifications, you put together the paragraph that you see here. Now, it definitely has, some of the best traits that you could list, and you definitely want to hit them real hard in this area because this is where you're going to catch their attention here in this section. And you want to be strong with keywords. But this paragraph violates one of the most critical aspects, one of the most critical rules that we have in place. It's too long. It's one long block of text. In the last chapter, we learned that any block of text that's longer than 4 or 5 lines has a very slim chance of being read at all. People are just going to see it and it's going to look too overwhelming and they're going to skip it. So you've got to think of the needs of the hiring manager and not your own. Laser target directly at what they're looking for. And here's how you would do that. Assuming that this resume is for, a laboratory position, we're going to consider the needs of the laboratory hiring manager. What kind of qualifications are they looking for? I wrote this paragraph initially based on, information that I obtained from my resume reconnaissance. For example, I found out that the laboratory is international, so I mentioned my special language skills, fluent in English and Spanish. And that's great, but since this paragraph's so long, nobody's going to read it. They're not going to find out. So let's break it down into an executive summary with the keywords in a separate paragraph. This reads a whole lot better. It's more reader-friendly. Plus, I used industry terms, things that cut to the chase, terminology they're going to recognize. That's what keywords are. These keywords describe my qualifications at a glance. So I mentioned, for example, the RK4 certification, and I used the word patented. That's going to strike a chord with them. And the job that we have of this section, the keywords and executive summary, is to capture the attention of the hiring manager. If we have done that successfully, then they're going to move on. They're going to continue to the next section. And this is where the real meat of your resume exists. So we definitely want to get them moved on to the next section, which is your accomplishments. This is where we're really going to drive home a solid set of pertinent achievements. And I've got 6 guidelines for you that you need to follow when you put together your list of accomplishments. First is an accomplishment statement should always tell a story. An accomplishment statement should begin with an action verb. It should contain some type of action. And it should show how that action benefited the company. And if possible, quantify the benefit. And then try to tie the benefit of that accomplishment to the existing need that's within the company you're applying to. Let's look at an example. Led cost reduction and re-engineering strategies that produced more than $300 million in annual savings. The story here is that a clever employee has saved their employer a lot of money, and it begins with the word led. That's an action verb. The action is the implementation of cost reduction and re-engineering strategies. The benefit is obviously that they saved over $300 million. And that, of course, meets the need of the company that we're applying to because they want to stay ahead of the competition. Let's look at another example. Achieved 17 consecutive quarters of market share growth by implementing successful multiple marketing programs. We've got the same thing. We start with an action verb. We quantified that by giving a specific number, and it shows clearly how we actually implemented something, and it shows the benefit of that. The reason this is so important is because recruiters need proof that you have delivered in the past. Remember, their career could very well be on the line. They're going to assume, if you can show them proof that you've delivered in the past, they're going to assume that you can deliver in the future, and they're going to be much more likely to recommend you to one of their clients. Now, the things they don't care about here in the accomplishments section is your day-to-day, the mundane things that you do on the job. They don't care that you have to talk to people on the phone. They don't care that, you had to stand on your feet for 5 hours a day. They don't care so much about the normal duties. They care about special things that you've accomplished, and you've got to tell them what's special about you. Remember, they're busy people. They've got like a zillion resumes on their desk that they've got to go through, and you've got to give them exactly what they need, which is an easy-to-understand list of relevant accomplishments. Here's another one. Saved the company $1.2 million as director of sales through the successful negotiation of a warranty claim filed by a large building owner in Illinois. Again, the same important points. But what do you do if you can't think of anything that's exceptional about what you've done? Well, believe it or not, that happens to the best of experts. They're guilty of what's called unconscious competence, meaning that they actually do excellent work without even thinking about any of their previous successes. So they can perform basically on autopilot without even trying. And that means that to look back for them on amazing achievements that they made sometimes is a little bit difficult. They don't notice it quite as easily. So if you're stuck, just think about your job and how you can distinguish yourself from others. This is really simple to do. Even if you do data entry, for example, look at your error rate. Look at your number of entries per hour. Anything that you can use to distinguish yourself from someone else. And it doesn't even have to be, phenomenal numbers. For example, if you work on a team of data entry personnel, maybe there's 4 or 5 people of you, and all of you average 200 entries a day or something. You can still use that number because you don't have to tell them, that everybody on your team does that. You just put 200 entries a day. If you're a project manager, look at the number of projects that you've completed that were under budget or maybe were ahead of schedule. If your projects were over budget, you can still turn a twist on that and focus on the amount of money that you've been responsible for. So there's a lot of ways that we can turn this and actually show accomplishments. No matter what your job is, look at the numbers. Present those numbers in a way that expresses the truth, but it also puts you in a good light and shows your accomplishments. Let's go back to the example of working on a team. Let's say you work on a team and you perform maybe somewhere in the middle or even on the lower end of that team. You don't have to put performed at the low end of the team for the last 6 months. In fact, I'd advise that you don't do that. Instead, though, separate yourself from that group and focus on your numbers. So you could say, processed 128 claims or more every month for the last 6 months. Differentiate yourself. They don't always need to know specifically what those numbers mean. And what I just said could very well be the same information, but I've presented it in a totally different way. And that's how you want to look at it. And I got to tell you, this is one of the best kept trade secrets of resume writers is listing accomplishments because most people don't do it very well. A resume with hard-hitting accomplishments is going to almost always get an interview. Now, maybe you can't quantify your results, and that's entirely possible. In that case, what you need to do is use non-specific benefits. If you got involved in a project that didn't have a formal name, you can give it a formal name. That's okay to do. But notice what we did here in using non-specific benefits. I used the word increased. So we increased park visibility by producing, publishing, etc. I don't have to give exact numbers if I absolutely can't do that. Numbers are good if they're available. But if you can't use exact numbers, use a word like this that just means, increased or expanded, anything like that. Accomplishments are incredibly important because they show what you can actually do and your own level of confidence. And the person that's reading your resume has to be convinced that you're confident that you can do the job. This is the one thing that stands out between just an average resume that gets ignored and a great resume that gets an interview. In fact, accomplishments are so important that I've got something else that I want to talk to you about. Remember that you're a teacher. And if you can connect your accomplishments on a personal level, then you've done your job. For example, if your neighbor was to walk up to you and tell you that with some wise investment strategies that he followed, he made a good deal of money, you'd probably be impressed. You'd say, hey, that's great news, Bob. But if he went on to tell you that he made so much money that he was able to take it and retire and buy a 12-room villa in a tropical island in the South Pacific, you're probably going to invite him over for dinner and, find out more details. And the key here is, if you can personalize the benefits and show how it's going to potentially help them, then they're going to want to meet you. And you want to do more than just impress them. You want to entice them. Your accomplishments should be prominent. They need to be right after the executive summary and the keywords, in the middle or the top half of the first page. And it's okay if they overlap and they continue on to the second page. That's all right. But they need to start in the top half of page 1. And here's an accomplishment tip. Another good technique is to bullet out accomplishments in the professional experience section. That's the section that we're going to talk about next. That keeps your list from being too long. So what I've done is I've taken some of the accomplishments that I could have included in the accomplishments section, but I instead brought them down to the professional experience section, and I'm listing them here. And this really is a great technique because it uses just the job description that you would normally put here, primarily just to set the stage for what you actually want them to focus on, which is the accomplishments themselves. And speaking of professional experience, that is coming up next. This needs to include your professional work history in reverse chronological order. It needs to show your title, the company name, and the years that you worked there. You want to format all of those elements so that they stand out and grab attention, just like this. This is two separate entries. We've got the place where we worked. Notice that it's all capitalized. Then we've got a location here in the years, and then the job title. The job title is bold. What this does is make those different elements stand out because they're all different. Your most recent job needs to show up first, and that should have the most detail. You want to be real careful making the description too long, too. You don't want it to overshadow the accomplishments. And if you're listing your accomplishments as part of your professional experience, like we've done here, not in a separate section, then your accomplishments are going to have those bulleted points under here like you saw in the last slide. Otherwise, what you're going to do is bullet out the descriptions of those jobs. And definitely after the second job, you don't want to show as much detail. So for example, after listing these two jobs, we're going to, of course, add some bullet points for the accomplishments and descriptions. But after that, other jobs that are going to be listed are only going to get like 2 or 3 bullet points. And I want to make a point about the title here. If the title that your company used, whether that's your current company or a past one, if that title doesn't really mean anything, if it's not descriptive enough, then use a better one. Create something that describes the job better. Now, that doesn't mean that you totally lie and change your job. So you can't put, I was a logistics engineer if you were just a stock clerk. But if the company that you were working at called the position a picker, and that doesn't really describe exactly what it is, then change it and use the term stock clerk if you want, or whatever your resume reconnaissance work tells you that you should use. Be careful not to get too lengthy in this section. Remember, you want to keep things visually appealing. It needs to look nice. Number 5 is education. And this is an area that for some reason people get a little bit scared of, but really it's not that bad. A couple of guidelines. Number 1, never put down any education that you don't actually have. It's okay to omit things if you think they're going to be harmful, but never put down something you don't possess. Let me give you an example of harmful education that you could put down. If you've got a PhD in electronics and you're applying for whatever reason for a position in a bookstore, then you probably want to leave those initials off your name because the hiring manager of that bookstore is going to think that you're overqualified, and they're probably not going to call you. They're going to think maybe that you want too much money. So put down any information that you think is going to be helpful, but feel free to omit anything that won't be helpful. Include the names of schools, locations, degrees or majors, and dates of graduation. Remember, all that information, maybe you're an alumni to the same college that they are, all that information has the possibility of helping or possibly hurting your chances. But you definitely want to put it down. If your grade point average is fantastic, then put it down. If it's, like 3.7 or whatever. If it's average, then don't include it. If you didn't graduate, you still want to include that time, that you spent maybe in college or at a VOTAC school or something like that. Feel free to take care of that by doing something like this. I listed Chaffey College, attended 3 years, 1997 to 2000. So that's safe to do. And you see, that's it. We're done with the education. That wasn't so bad, was it? Next up is professional affiliations. All those dues that you've been paying? Well, they're finally going to help you out. First off, don't list anything that's personal. It's not going to help you one bit, and it's very likely that it could hurt you. So no hobbies, no religious affiliations, nothing like that. Include anything that is relevant to the position or the company. If you're applying for a graphics design position, you'd want to put on there that you're a member of the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, for example. Okay? And that brings us to the last section. That's training. This is the last, but it's also very important. There's a lot of benefits here. Showing that you've taken training, especially recently, shows that you're an active learner. They're not going to have that, can't teach an old dog new tricks scenario. It also makes you appear more tech savvy, and that's very important, especially if you're an older job seeker. They want to know that you're up to date, and at least that you're willing to get up to date. You only want to list professional training, and make sure that you include any diplomas or certificates that you received. And that, my friend, is basically it. Let's take a look at the bottom line. Recruiters are busy people. You need to give them exactly what they're looking for. These people have got a lot of work to do. They've got a lot of resumes to go through. They'd love an excuse to just throw your resume in the trash. So don't give them an excuse to do that. Typos are the death sentence. Make sure you proofread. We all make mistakes, but trust me, if your resume arrives with any kind of typos, you look like an idiot, and that's how they're going to treat you. Now let's go ahead and do a quick review. Make sure your resume is visually appealing. We've got 7 sections. Your contact information needs to be right at the top so that they can see it. Keywords and executive summary, very important. It's going to catch their eye and make them determine if they're going to continue reading the resume. Then we've got our accomplishments, your professional experience, and your education. You'll also list any professional affiliations, any training you've had. The key thing here is that important information needs to be front and center at the top of that first page. That creates that coveted curb appeal for your resume real estate. Without that, they're not even going to consider your offer. So spend a little bit more time in that section, that middle third. You want to make sure that that's matched up with a well-formatted body of text. And if you do that, your next step is going to be figuring out what you need to wear to the interview. And you'll come to that interview with an already created advantage. In the next chapter, we're going to take a look at what you should leave in and what you should leave out of your resume.